Yep, there's that sound. That means we're starting another episode of Yesshift. Over to you,
Yeah,
Steve.
sorry, I thought you were gonna say I'm Dan and this is Steve,
Oh,
but yeah, so you're Dan, I'm Steven, and we are joined by a friend of the show who also hosts the Yes Music podcast and has written another book about Yes. He previously wrote the Tormato story, and now he's written Tales from Topographic Oceans, the Yes album listening guide. It is Kevin Mulryne. How's it going?
Hi there. Very well, thank you. How are you guys?
really
Good.
well, thanks. Yeah. I'm excited to talk about this because I don't know if I've mentioned this on previous occasions, Kevin, but this is my stuck on an album island. It's my stuck on an island album, and now I have the listening guide when I'm stuck on that island. I might just go to that island to do that, and of course it came with the supplement. This is really a treat. I'm eager to dive into it, but I'm gonna let Steven kick it off.
Yeah, so to start off, what was the origin of how you decided to make Tales the next Yes album to focus on in book form?
Other than the fact that you knew it was my favorite album.
Yeah, obviously that had a lot to do with it. But now
Yeah.
I have an e-newsletter which I publish every week for my outside podcast. Yes, antics, things like writing books and so on. And after I'd finished the Tomato story, I was thinking about what album to do next. With, I suppose, the ultimate aim of doing as many albums as I can possibly do. But thinking about it in a slightly different way. And the original idea was to start doing these listening guides rather than trying to tell the whole story of an album. But that kind of changed as it went along, and I ended up doing that anyway. But the idea was to just have a listening guide, which does form part of this new book, but in fact is only part of this new book. So anyway, I asked the subscribers to my e-newsletter which book they would like me to do next, and so we had a poll, and Tales came out really quite strongly that people wanted to have this listening guide to help them get the best out of the album, I suppose, or try and find different things about the album to talk about and to investigate. So yes, that was the reason for it, and it was a fairly daunting prospect, obviously, because Tales
Yeah.
not just a double album, but a double album with four movements making up a single work, really. And so there was an awful lot to go through.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you mind telling us, unless it's too much of a spoiler, what albums came in second and third, and might those be on your list to do next in that order?
Yes, well, the other ones that I imagined people might want to focus on were Relaya, and even going back right to the first Yes album and starting from there and going sort of sequentially through the albums, but and drama, even those sorts of things, 90125, some other kind of iconic albums in a different way. So
Right.
yes, those ones were definitely in the offing. And as I met and talked to Gennaro Rippo for the Tales book, and what he did next with the band was to go to New Piper's Chris's house and set up Eddie Alford's gear, and Gennaro was there for all those recording sessions as well for Relaya. So I certainly will concentrate on Relaya at some point, and probably after the next project that I'm doing is finished.
Great.
So,
That's great.
yeah, so between this and the book on Tormato, which did you find more challenging and why?
Well, I think the Tales one was. I mean, it was daunting. I mean, the Tomato book, I had a kind of personal um, need to do that, I suppose, because it is my favorite Yes album. It was the first Yes album I heard of a progressive bent, rather than 90125, which is the first Yes music I ever heard. But yes, it's my favorite album. I've got a large collection of Tomato material, so I knew it wasn't going to be much of an issue getting the right material for that book. But Tales, although it's one of my favorite Yes albums, is not an album that I knew an awful lot about. So it was daunting, and it had always been daunting whenever we talk about Yes albums on the Yes Music podcast, simply because of its length, its scope, and not just its length, but its scope and its complexity as well. So yes, it was more daunting, and also, of course, with the Tomato Stories, the first book I'd ever written, not just about Yes, but a first book. So I didn't really know what I was letting myself in for. Whereas when I came to this book, I knew that it would take a couple of years probably, and quite apart from finding the information and doing the interviews and putting all the stuff together, is all the technical book writing and book publishing aspect of it as well, which is not straightforward. So yes, I think the Tales one was more of a daunting prospect.
Yeah, what's great about the podcasts that you do is whenever you do a Tales themed episode, it's kind of like looking at the behind the scenes of what's coming up and trying to figure out, okay, which bit of this is going to end up in the book. So it's pretty cool how some of those episodes are very much like the lead up to this book in a way.
Yes, absolutely, and that's deliberate, and it's turned out to be a very good way of researching the book. So there's an aspect of the book that I'm interested in, and I find either someone who was there at the time, if they're willing to talk to me and if they're still around, or there's someone who knows an awful lot more than I do about the particular aspect of the book. So getting them onto the podcast to talk to them and interview them about that is a really good way of doing it.
In a moment, I'd like to point out some things that I really appreciate about the book, but I want to run something by both of you and get your thoughts on this. I found this earlier today when I was actually looking up something else, and I came across this Reddit post that is by r/prog rock music from a year ago, Dave, and a bunch of numbers after that. And the title of the post is, "I can't believe that after 50 years, we still don't have the full version of Tales from Topographic Oceans." And I'll just read the 2-paragraph post real quickly. It says, "The revealing science of God originally clocked in at close to 30 minutes, according to Steve Howe himself. They cut 10 minutes to fit it well on the LP because, let's be honest, it's not the best recorded album to begin with." Now, I don't know if he means the production or the playing, but I think the production is awesome considering the year and what they had to work with. That's another story. But then he goes on to say they weren't going to Todd Rundgren that expletive. Then it says, "It baffles me that after 50 years and countless remixes and remasters," and I do agree with him there, "that the full version has still never been restored. Believe me, I checked Discogs, even on the Blu-ray release, and all that's ever been," sorry, don't have my reading glasses on, "put back in this 2-minute instrumental intro. There's no limitations anymore. So I don't understand what's never been released." Maybe, and this is my take, the only thing I can think of, maybe there's stuff in that 10 minutes that none of them were happy with. That could be it. But what's your guys' take on that? It is a very valid question for such a long piece. Like, yeah, why don't we have it even longer? Like, it's curious. Like, what did they cut out?
Yeah, I think it's fascinating, and I was lucky enough to have an email conversation with Simon Wilson. No, sorry, I don't mean Simon Wilson, do I? Who do I mean? Stephen Wilson.
Steve, yeah.
Oh dear. He was very, very kind and spoke to me quite a bit via email about his remixes of the album for the Blu-ray version. And I'm pretty sure from what he said that he had been through all the material that does exist on the master tapes. So if this 10 minutes or however long it is does still exist, it's certainly not on those master tapes that they kept. So I wouldn't be surprised if it had been discarded.
Yeah.
It may well turn up at some point. But talking to Steve Howe about this, he's not, he would much prefer, to be absolutely honest, he would prefer no new remixing to be done and no digging really to be done in the archives, and no finding extra stuff, because he would prefer it all to be kept absolutely as it was. And when Stephen Wilson was doing his process that he always does for remixing and reimagining albums, sometimes he had sessions with the original musicians, which lasted for days or hours at least. And Steve Howe did go and see Stephen Wilson, but he only spent about an hour with him. And considering that it's a double album with so much material, that's not very long. So Steve definitely wants to keep these things as a time capsule, as it were, of the mix that they came up with at the time. And as it was Eddie Offord doing it, that
I like that.
He feels that that's the best way to hear this music now. After having said that, of course, he has recently rearranged the whole thing and concertinaed it into 18 minutes or something. So he's not too precious about it, perhaps.
Yeah, Steve, do you have thoughts on that post?
Yeah, it's like you can compare it to movie making, right? You shoot all the footage and you might end up with a 4-hour long assembly cut, which you would need to then cut down into something that's watchable. And there are fans who would like to see the entire 4 hours or whatever. And I don't think they actually do, because I think that would throw off the pacing. So when I hear about this like half-hour revealing science of God or something, that's possibly my favorite Yes song. And I do love listening to the studio run-throughs and all those things out of curiosity to see how things evolved. But for all we know, the extra 10 minutes or whatever it is, maybe 8 minutes, now that we have the instrumental intro and whatnot, maybe it's not as compelling. Maybe it's some noodling around. Maybe it halts the momentum. So if we were to listen to a half-hour long version, we'd be sitting here thinking, okay, when are they gonna get to the part that I really love? Like, can you speed this up a bit? Because we know the song as it is so well. So I'm not necessarily too precious about wanting those extra minutes. Like, I'd be curious about them, but I'm not like holding my breath for it, I guess.
Yeah, two things on that. One, what if it's those sections that are extended, that, as Rick Wakeman refers to them, as padding, just the long ethereal chords, and what if it's just a bunch of that? And the other thing that Steve mentioned that brought to my mind is when he said listening to like the run-throughs and everything. There's been a few of those, not with Tales as much, but like there's a couple of run-throughs I've heard of Awaken, and it made me think, how did they ever arrive at what ended up on the album? So it's kind of fun to listen to those for that reason. I agree. But it's interesting. It'd be fun to include just those 10 or 8 minutes, as Steve pointed out, on just a separate extras album, like the stuff they did in Paris that came out separately, little things like that. That'd be a neat buried bone to just surface one day and go, whoa, and to not know if it's all one continuous 8 minutes. Let's pretend for a moment, and not 3 2 2/3 minute sections that are scattered, but to take those 8 minutes and go, wow, where would this have gone? Or are we able to tell with how it comes in and how it goes out? That'd be a fun little puzzle to explore, I think.
Yeah, and we have a couple comments which I'll show here. So
okay, but then the antithesis of that is that if they did that, Kevin wouldn't be done with the book yet.
Right.
Well, yeah, that's an interesting one, actually. Again, Stephen Wilson, he tried to persuade me not to publish when I did, actually, and because we know we've got the expanded version of the album to come out, so it looks like it's probably going to be next year now. So, and with these things always take longer than they say. So I couldn't really wait any longer, but maybe I'll need to do some kind of a supplement or something. Who can say?
That'd be cool. Cool. Steve, what are the comments we've got?
Right, so we have the Prague Corner tuning in saying Tales is the greatest achievement in the history of mankind.
Absolutely.
Above Crackers and the Telephone.
No, just below Tormato, you know.
Oh, okay, there you go.
Absolutely.
Peter de Mori says, more noodling and padding. Bring it on. It's all history and perspective.
Good point. I'm on board. Good point. Totally good point. That's funny.
Yeah, Robert Nasir has 2 comments here. This one, I totally understand and mostly agree with the no remixes view held by Steve Howe, though given his homebrew series as well as Fly From Here Return Trip, that is a little surprising.
That is true, especially with Return Trip and erasing the whole Benoit thing. We won't get into that, but yeah, that's a really good point. Like,
Yeah.
is it anything after a certain year you can screw around with, but anything before has to stay in the time capsule? Like, what's the border on that, Steve Howe?
Right. And Robert also says, peculiar common denominators. Tales led to Rick Wakeman's first departure from the band, and Tormato his second, along with John Anderson. Pushing boundaries can be risky business. In retrospect, so worth it.
Yeah, absolutely. A couple of things I like to point out about the book, and then I'm sure Steve wants to chime in on some things. One is this supplement is so cool. Such a great job on this. And what it is, folks, I'll sort of flip through it. It's a visual pictorial of elements of everything from what's involved to elements of the album cover to you got a bunch of live shots, you got rehearsals, you got gear breakdowns. I mean, just some really, really cool lunchtime with the band. Yeah. Some really, really great stuff. But one of the other things I saw this, I went, whoa, that must have taken forever. This whole starting on page, literally the listening guide on, it's like a roadmap on 145, and it goes through. You've got, literally, I'm gonna hold up so people can see, breaking down, different elements of the song with timestamps. But then following that, we get this grid. And I have to go to that island I keep talking about, because that's the only place I have the time and the non-disturbance to like listen and read this and go, oh, that's that part. There's that part. And the one thing I read in here, Kevin, I don't know if I can find it exactly, but I remember it.
Yeah.
2 things. One is where you point out that Rick is doing something, I think, on the Hammond or church organ that then resurfaces in the harp part of Awaken. And I was trying to hear that in my head. So I'm going to have to get the album out to listen to that. And then the other one is right here where I flipped to where the guitars are noted, where the relayer section includes unusual sounding fast electric guitar from Howe, which moves in between octaves. So I find it interesting that there are some callbacks or call forwards, if you will, in the music, and we've heard that before, such as in we hear Close to the Edge, and we hear Siberian Khatru for brief fleeting moments in, is it the Remembering or in
it's in the Ancient.
Yeah. And I loved, like, I'll never forget hearing that for the first time and going, oh, and picking up the needle and putting it back, like, did I just hear what I think I heard? And yeah, you did. So now that you've dug up more things like that, I want to go back and follow the map along,
Yes.
Really good job on that.
Yeah, it's remarkable what does come back and what's referred to. And as with all these great works, there was a plan, that it's not just, it would be nice to think that the idea of Yes and Eddie Alford's in the studio just randomly putting pieces of physical tape together and seeing what happens would, that'd be nice to think that happened. And there was a bit of that happened, particularly actually in Close to the Edge, for example. That happened quite a bit. But I think Steve Howe and John Anderson had much more of a plan of what sections led into other sections with Tales, and they spent many evenings, into the small hours of the morning on tour, putting this whole suite, this whole piece together, and it was quite a lot of that, I think, was deliberate.
Yeah, I wonder how much of it was spontaneous versus it just came out and someone said, oh, keep that. I just find that so interesting to get that story if we don't know.
Yes, yes. I think there was a bit of both, but you know, again, that there are recollections of those who were there at the time with Chris Squire when he turned up. Of course, he was always late, but when he did turn up, working again through the night, honing every single note of his parts, and I'm sure he came across different parts of the four sides where he could fit in, you know, material he'd used elsewhere, and it fitted beautifully. And you know, they were working on this for 3 months, I think. So you did have time as a band to do quite a lot of plotting out of different sections and how things fit together. So by the end of it, when they came to play it, apart from Rick, who didn't particularly learn the parts for the live concerts, but yeah, I think they knew the music very, very well when they eventually went out live and played it before the record itself came out even.
All right, Steve, do you have some favorite parts of the books you'd like to point out?
Yeah, I really appreciate how when it comes to the 2016 Steven Wilson remix, you break down what is in, like, what's noticeable in those remixes. Because, you know, speaking for myself, I've listened to the Close to the Edge one that came out recently, and for the life of me, I feel like I just do not have the ear to like figure out what's different about this. I was like, am I just listening to the wrong upload? This is the official channel, so like, what's going on here?
And I haven't listened to it. I hate to say this, no disrespect to Steve Wilson, but I kind of have, I'm sort of in the Steve Howe camp where I have no interest. It sounds the way it sounds because that's what they had to work with, and that's how production worked, and that's what the gear was. I kind of, with the exception, I'm sorry, Kevin, of your favorite album, I think the production is just, it sounds like it's in a shoebox, and Alan's drums are just so horrid. But at the same time, the music is so good that all of that is a huge part of what does make it sound like it does. So as much as I personally would love to just remix it myself for fun, I'm not interested in hearing anybody else's. That's so hypocritical, right? Like what's up with me? But I totally see that. Like, I don't want to hear Yes songs remixed. You know, that was recorded with what they had. To me, that's just so important. You know, it's like, let's do that 1969 Le Mans race again, but with newer cars and call it the same thing. What? It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, and I tend to agree. Stephen Wilson also, the idea of his remixing, which he's become the master of remixing, and nobody does it quite like him, or has done quite so many iconic albums as Stephen Wilson has done. But his plan was never to remix these classic albums at all. And once he started looking at the master tapes and remastering them, and normally he was brought on board by record companies, by artists themselves, to come up with 3.1 surround sound mixes.
Right.
That's what he thought he was doing. But at the same time, he did stereo mixes, and the bands and the record companies always wanted those mixes to be released, and that was never the intention. That was never Stephen Wilson's
That's
intention.
interesting.
And so and he is, the nice thing about him is that, well, first of all, he's an extremely generous and lovely guy, but also he is genuinely excited by all this music, and genuinely does want to dig into the master tapes and see what else was mixed down and mixed up. And the version he does is certainly not intended to be a definitive new version of an album. He would never ever say that. He would always promote the original version, but what he's doing is digging into it and finding his own different personal version. As you've just said, you might like to have a go at that yourself, and we have the technology now to do that, of course, to go back and split everything up, all the tracks into individual tracks, and do it ourselves. But I just wanted to just mention one last thing about Stephen and how kind he was, because he actually emailed me, first of all, because he'd been given a copy of the Tormato book, because it's one of his favorite albums, and there was this. Yeah, there was this idea going around that the 5 albums that Stephen Wilson did remix of Yes albums, and then he stopped, or he appeared to have stopped, and the received wisdom about that was that he had got to the end of the ones he was interested in remixing, and that's not true. Stephen Wilson very much wanted to go on and remix Going for the One and Tomato. Now, he was told at the time that the master tapes for both of those albums were not available, in inverted commas, not available. Now, that's not true, because they are very much both available in the vaults, in the Warner vaults, because I know people who have seen them and
Yeah.
have worked with them and were there when the digitizing was done. So these could be done. It's much more likely that that Rhino, that Atlantic, that Warner, whoever you want to call them nowadays, are not interested in doing those. They don't feel that they are.
They left out the part to
they're-
you when they said they're not available. They forgot to say to
that's
you.
to you. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. So
And to be, go ahead. Go ahead.
no, I just wanted to make that point that Stephen did email me about it, and then I started a conversation with him saying there are track lists which he used, and did he still have access to them? And very, very kindly, he sent me both the photographs of the master tapes that he used, and also the track lists from those as well. So that was really, really
Interesting.
kind.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And to be clear, I don't think people that want that are wrong, or that
No.
there's anything wrong with it. It's just not my thing. That's all. I kind of, again, with what Mr. Howe said, like, leave it. It marks that time as well. It's more than just the music. It's how it ended up sounding the way it did. But
Yes.
here's Peter says, love remixes. I would take the same album remixed 10 times over a lifetime. Stare at the Mona Lisa from 5 feet away for most of your life. Now back up 10 steps, then go left 3 perspectives on classic works. That's a good take.
Yeah. Absolutely. And what we wouldn't have had also, of course, is that original version of All Fighters Past, which was one of the key components which was built into Tales, and that was discovered in the master tapes from the Close to the Edge sessions, and that gives a fascinating insight into what that song would have been, much faster and much brighter, and with lots of guitar soloing and things on it that didn't happen in the end as it was built into Tales.
Yeah, was it Close to the Edge, or was it the Fragile sessions?
Oh, Fragile. Yes, I think you're right. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And I did ask Steve about that. He had absolutely no memory of recording that whatsoever.
Right.
So, yes, fascinating for him as well.
Yeah, another parallel between Tormato and Tales is they both kind of have this geographic landmark element to them. You know, on Tormato, there's Tor with the map included, and on Tales, you have stuff like the Mayan pyramid. What was it like delving into that aspect of this book?
Well, I found that all absolutely fascinating, and we've all seen these paintings, these artworks, just behind you there, Dan.
Right.
So many times.
In the book.
Yes, and that's the pyramid itself. Yes, that's right. And we've seen them so many times. We know them so well, but have we ever really delved into exactly what they are? And when I found out things like Roger Dean pointing out that this is the only album cover he's ever done where everything on the cover is real, is taken from life. You can go and visit all these places that he puts together, smashed together, as it were, into this wonderful wraparound artwork for the front cover. And yes, the cover of my book has a photograph of that Mayan temple at Chichen Itza, or however you pronounce it, Chichen Itza. I don't know how to pronounce it, but anyway, it's a fascinating place. And yes, Paul Lowe, who did the album cover for me, it's his photograph on the front cover of that. So that was the first thing that got me interested in it. And then once I'd gone down that particular rabbit hole, I couldn't stop myself, and I desperately wanted to know where all these groups of boulders and rocks and things existed. And there are some, and you might think that all these rocks are Stonehenge, but no, they're dotted around Britain, quite a lot of them. And once you find out one thing about that, and the fact that Roger Dean took a lot of these images from a collection of photographs that someone he worked with presented him with at some point, that that leads you somewhere else. And also, I found a blog post by a guy called Scott M. McDaniel. And if you're listening or watching this, Scott, then please do get in touch, because I've never been able to contact him. And it's absolutely fascinating the way he delves into exactly where that temple is on the horizon, which crosses these golden section lines. And whether or not Roger Dean knew he was doing this kind of thing, I don't know. And I don't think Roger can remember, frankly, because it's quite a long time ago. And the guy's in his 80s now, so it's hardly surprising. But yes, you can analyze the pictures and find all sorts of motion lines and things. But then you can also find the particular fish that are swimming as if in air or around the topographic ocean, and you can find out what kind of fish those are. And there are fossils in some of the rocks, and you can find out what those are. And it's in the end, we will never know what Roger had in his mind putting all these elements together, but it's certainly fun to guess. So I very, very much enjoyed doing that. And the fact that our friend Doug Curran found Roger's signature hiding in only one version of the cover. There's a Roger Dean signature on top of one of the rocks, which doesn't appear in any of the versions. And again, Roger Dean has no idea how that got there. It must have been
That's interesting.
An impression left by a piece of writing he had on the acetate or whatever it was that they were using at the time. So now there's all sorts of fascinating things. And what is it that's hiding behind the rocks in the middle?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we get the cat paw prints too.
Yeah.
Songs. And one of our commenters, all one same, says Chichen Itza as the pronunciation.
Right.
So
thank you very much.
There we go. So another thing, for those who may not know, where does Tales rank for you among Yes albums, if you had to place it anywhere?
Funny thing about ranking Yes albums is that there are no two Yes albums which are quite the same. And
right.
You wouldn't say that Relayer is in the same sound world as Tales, or that Tales is really in the same sound world, although there are some links too close to the edge. So that they're all very different, and therefore I find them quite difficult to rank. In terms of, I suppose there are two ways around I think about it. In terms of albums that I like and I love, Tales would be right up in the top 4, 5, if not top 3 for me. In a list of albums of great music, I think it might be even higher than that, because I think Tales does something that no other Yes album does, and that really no other progressive rock album, any other rock album has ever done, which is the grandeur of its statement. Is it this expanse across 4 sides? Yes, sure, there are rock albums which are just as long and very much more up to date. Something like Transatlantic, that's an excessively long record. What's that one called? The Absolute Universe, or whatever that was called, which is much longer than Tales and hangs together very, very well indeed. But Tales, especially for the time, nobody had attempted anything like this.
Right.
There are other double albums, there are other concept albums, but this is the only one which takes it to this degree of having very much a single piece across 4 minutes.
It came before The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway. It came before A Passion Play, which is one story, but it's not a double album. The
No, that's
concept
right.
is there, but it came 3 years later.
And what they were thinking was, particularly John Anderson, but he got Steve Howe on side to work with him on it, was what do you do after Close to the Edge? Because everyone involved with Close to the Edge realized that it was a work of utter genius and would never be topped, in my opinion, in progressive rock. So Tales doesn't beat Close to the Edge, and I think the whole side, Close to the Edge song itself is probably the towering achievement of Yes, but this does take it that step further, and if Rick Wakeman had stayed, if things had stayed the same, they would have had to go a different direction, and something like Relayer, which takes the story on further and goes in a very different direction. I suppose it's Tales was the logical endpoint of everything they could do, from longer and longer songs, from more complex songs. Tales really is at the top of the pile there for that.
Makes sense. And I'll touch on one of those changes in a moment. But first, going through this process, did that change your ranking at all of how you feel about it? And I know we're using ranking in a subjective manner here, but did you fall more in love with it or analyze it so much that you found so many things that you weren't fond of, or, you know what I mean? I guess any of it's fair.
No, I don't think I found anything that I wasn't
Okay.
fond of. And in fact, listening to it in such great detail as I did for the book, I developed my understanding of it and knowledge of it and love of it very, very much so. Did it change the ranking? Yeah, I suppose so.
Okay.
But again, as I say, the ranking is difficult because
Yeah.
you really can't compare any two albums.
Yeah, you're not comparing. We are not able to compare apples to apples within the same band's catalog because of what you said.
Yeah.
You know, it's not, you don't even, in some ways, even hear an even transition. Like, what I mean is when you think of, let's say Led Zeppelin 4 into Houses of the Holy into Physical Graffiti, it's clearly the same, you know, band doing, I don't want to say the same thing, but the ethos of it is the same. Whereas, like you're pointing out with Yes, they go from this to Relayer to Going for the One. Like, what? And all the short songs, like, all of a sudden things just go woo, just in as different direction as they did from when they started with Fragile and went in a totally different direction. And speaking of different directions, you cite an interview where Alan White, who was new to the band, said he fit in pretty well because he was already vegetarian. Yeah. Meanwhile, elsewhere, we know about how Rick Wakeman he spent time next door with Black Sabbath and didn't indulge in a lot of things the other Yes musicians would, with Offred even saying he was a bit of an outsider at the time. How important do you think uniform consumption habits are when it comes to having a band feel united? And I happen to know that some of those consumption habits changed over time, but that's another thing. And what I mean by that is I know that Alan didn't stay vegetarian. And I always wonder what makes people change. I never asked him that, but yeah, what are your thoughts on that? It's a great question. Steve came up with that.
Yeah, it is a very interesting question, and certainly that was one of the things which set Rick Wakeman apart from the rest of the band. And it was just, I suppose, random that Alan joined the band and he was already a vegetarian. He was interested in those sorts of concepts. That it wasn't just vegetarianism, of course, that feeds into your worldview as well.
Right.
The way you think about the planet and about music and art and everything is all bound up with that attitude towards food, I think. So that was one of the ways in which Alan White was found it easier than he possibly could have done. I mean, the other things were that he was an amazing musician and just a wonderful, wonderful person. And this was his first time recording with Yes, his first time recording this anything like this kind of music, because
Right.
his musical background was so varied, but none of it included this depth and this extreme progressive rock stuff going on. But no, I do think that it did mark Rick out as a very different character, interested in very different things. I think it was much more important that Rick was already, his solo career had taken off already, and at the back of your mind, however committed you are to Yes and to this record, you're always going to be thinking, well, if I didn't have to be here for 3 months, what could I be doing with my own band, with my own music, with my own concerts? And we know that Rick was always looking for the next most spectacular thing that he was going to do next. So
Yeah.
I think that was a differentiator, and I do think that that's not being vegetarian and therefore not enjoying the same sorts of meals and the same sorts of drinks and drugs and all those sorts of things that went with that. I think that was an important way in which he marked himself as a different part of the band, certainly, if not totally disconnected.
Yeah. And Bill Bruford had said that he felt he had done all that he could with Yes, but with Close to the Edge. But how different do you think this album would have been if he had stayed?
It's a really good question, and it's a very difficult one to answer because he was clearly so finished, so over the Yes music thing, and not just the music, because of course he loved Close to the Edge. He still does. He's still extremely proud of everything that he did with the band. But he would have been in that 3-month version of what he experienced in Close to the Edge, because Alan brought a very different sensibility, I think, to the proceedings. This was his first time recording with the band, as I say, and he was always looking for opportunities, I think, to get involved with the melodic writing, even adding some piano and those sorts of things to the record, doing probably more backing vocals and being in the Yes choir more than we realize. And I think Bill did get to that stage in his career when he started using electronic percussion, started thinking more about the melodic aspects of percussion itself, and could go off with King Crimson and all those different ways that he did. But I don't think he was at that point, and I think he had got so disillusioned with what the rest of the band felt that his role as a drummer should be, that it would have been very, very difficult for him to fit into that the whole Tales attitude and the Tales way of working that they had to come up with. Because remember that Steve Howe and particularly John Anderson were in charge of the whole Tales extravaganza. They had written all the music. They then had to go to Manticore Studios and teach the music essentially to the rest of the band and convince them that this was a worthwhile endeavor at all. The rest of the band could have turned around and said, "This is ridiculous. We're not doing this. It's far too overblown. Let's stop." And I think Bill Bruford in that situation at Manticore, I can't imagine him being happy to continue. So I think if he had started on the Tales project, I don't think he would have got through it. So I think they would have been in an even more difficult situation. He would have, because he didn't want to go out on the road in support of Close to the Edge, because it was just more of the same stuff for him, and he didn't want to do more of the same stuff. He wanted to go off and do something completely new and different, and that's what he's done for the whole of his career, except
and
when he came back into Yes for Union and ABWH. But yes, I think it would have probably crashed horribly if he'd stayed.
Yeah, what I think of with that, along with that, is more of the same process that he didn't
Yes.
enjoy, which was,
They didn't.
as he says in Yes Years, the band would deliberate for an hour and a half whether a note should be an F or an F sharp, and the thought of doing that for 2 albums worth, I think he would have lost
Yeah.
his mind. And like you said, just hit the eject button.
Yeah, I think so, and particularly as this was such a long album in every sense. Yeah.
Yeah, and we all know that some fans want to understand what the lyrics of Yes songs mean. And here we have the knowledge that the album was inspired by footnotes from Autobiography of a Yogi. But in your opinion, how important is it for fans to look into those footnotes and or decipher the meaning in Yes lyrics in order to enjoy the music?
Well, I think my take on John Anderson's Yes lyrics, particularly, not all the lyrics in Tales are down to John Anderson. Some of them are contributed by Steve and probably others as well, but it's mainly Steve and John. And I don't believe, as John and Anderson, I don't think believes that it is essential for listeners to understand what John's intentions were when he was writing the lyrics. He wanted everyone to read into it whatever they wanted, and I think that's still his that's where he's coming from. There is a great piece of analysis in the book from Simon Barrow, and he's much more of a linguist, and he's a poet himself, Simon Barrow, and he very kindly agreed to delve much further than I could possibly do into the lyrics. So if you're interested in reading meaning into the lyrics, I think you can do that, and I think you can do that on your own, and it doesn't have to be what the original intention was, because who knows, and who knows what substances were being used to enhance those lyrics at the time by John Anderson, and whether that had a greater or a lesser effect on what actually came out on the page. And for me, it's the musicality of the lyrics which is important, and the way that they conjure up the cosmic otherworldliness of Yes music, and that contributes a huge amount, I think, to the sound of Yes music and to how it comes over. So I love the sound of the lyrics and the way that they integrate with and sound with the music, but I've never been that worried about reading the meaning into it that John wanted to convey. That's just personal, though.
Yeah,
Right.
interesting. With how we think of the album's music, there's such a disconnect between the idea of the music and the band's practice of trying to make the studio look like a farm, even in the bathroom. For the farm aspect, Steve Howe said that people thought they took themselves too seriously,
Yeah.
and his comeback to that was us not taking ourselves seriously. But how different do you think the perception would have been if the band would have taken those cardboard cutouts on stage with them on tour? I mean, they're not exactly known as a comedic sort of,
No.
the way that's been the personality of Rush, but I think,
I was just thinking that Rush seems more likely to try that type of thing.
right.
Yes. Yes. Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I can't think of any other rock musician who is clearly as serious as Steve Howe about the music.
Yeah.
Otherwise, he wouldn't, he wouldn't be standing up on stage and telling people off in the audience who are using their phones or who are chatting or getting up or whatever. And he has been known to do that.
Yeah.
Because he's serious about the art of it and serious about the music. I think the antics in the studio, I think it was very light-hearted. I mean, it was all an idea that because John Anderson wanted to record the album in as natural a situation as possible. He wanted to record at night in a forest with the generators, the power generators sunk into the ground so they couldn't be heard on the recording. He'd got it all mapped out in his head. He didn't want to be in a studio at all. He wanted to be in nature. And actually, I think that might have been quite exciting. But anyway, they didn't get to do that. And so and nobody seems to seems to know exactly where it came from, who had the idea originally. But whoever it was, whether it was Brian Lane or Eddie Offord or who, they did start bringing in cutouts, cows and bales of straw,
Bales of
and
hay,
all
yeah.
and flowers and all this sort of thing. And I think it was fun for about a day, and then all the plants started to die, and it all looked really tired, and people started graffitiing the cutout cows and all this sort of thing. So it must have been a right mess by the end of it. But I think the original idea was just a bit of fun. But in terms of the stage set for Tales, and this is where it really started kicking off with all the stage sets that Roger and Martin Dean put together. It started with Tales, and a lot of the live, what we think of now as a Yes show in those days, was started off on the Tales tour, and it really set the pattern for the extravaganzas for decades up until the present day. And so I think Roger was absolutely serious about what he wanted to do with the whole visual aspect of the album and the tour, and he saw everything in the one. I suppose nowadays it would be called marketing. So he was talking about marketing the band's music and stage show and the album all in one.
So I got to ask, how? I wonder if you've discovered this or know the answer. How is it possible there's no film from this tour? That just escapes me like nothing else. Forget the 10 minutes. Where's the fucking film? Yeah. Seriously, to have such a work of art not encapsulated visually, there's no way it wasn't filmed in its entirety. Where's that?
Yeah, it's a real puzzle, isn't it? That and for so many Yes tours over the years, there isn't as much film as there should be. And one of the people that I spoke to about this was Michael Tate of Tate Towers, and one of the originators of the modern ways of doing rock shows from Tales onwards. And I said to him, have you got any photographs that you've kept behind the scenes on Tales and so on? And he has absolutely nothing at all. He doesn't have a single photograph of his time with Yes.
Wow. Was it just like a regular blue collar work day for him that he never thought it would mean anything to posterity or anything?
He never considered that any of it would be worth looking back. That's so weird. And I think this was the mentality of a lot of the people around the band. They thought it was, ephemeral. They thought that this stuff would never be thought of in the future, and that they would have gone on to something else by 2025. And so very little was kept. Now, Gennaro Rippo was in charge of the tapes at these tours, the Tales tour and the Relay tour, and he knew that there were three, because he was in charge of setting them up and running one of them. There were three reel-to-reel tape recorders at each audio tape recorders at each Tales gig. One was for playing in the things like the tape of Close to the Edge, the natural sounds at the beginning of Close to the Edge, and those sorts of effects which you couldn't do live. And another one was for things like the intro music. But the third one was for recording. And Gennaro Rippo is absolutely convinced, as I say, because he was there, that every single concert was recorded on reel-to-reel tape. So maybe somewhere is dozens and dozens of these reel-to-reel tapes of all the different concerts. But no, filming itself just doesn't seem to have been considered at this time at all. They put everything into the visual presentation of the concerts, but no effort, no money into actually recording them on film. And this is 1973, 74 we're talking about, and I think it was still prohibitively expensive to film anything. When you get as far as 1978 with the Tormato tours, a few people had already got the equipment set up. So I think it was excessively expensive to take equipment with you,
Mm.
and to just do, what we would do nowadays, which is we would have a camera set up and record every single concert. In those days, I think it was logistically very difficult. Everything was being done on a shoestring. Apart from the way that the band got round in private jets, but that's another story. Everything else was on a shoestring. The 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 way that the stages and etc. were packed or not packed properly, particularly in the UK, everything there was very little money around for that. So I
Right.
think that's probably unfortunately what it's down to.
Thanks for that. Couple comments real quick, and thanks,
Yeah,
Kevin.
and
Yeah.
I just want to chime in on that footage
Okay.
thing. Like, of course, we've seen like several minutes of footage that people were able to shoot, and they're on YouTube, but they're like snippets from various parts of songs, so not like a complete concert. But I do remember a while back I read this Notes from the Edge interview. I think it was with Alan, and he mentioned that they had someone from, I think from Canada, film a Tales show, and they don't know what happened with
That
that.
sounds
So
familiar.
Mm.
yeah, so that might be a thing, but
Yeah.
yeah,
Interesting. John Pickles says the best Yes album. Dave Watkinson, hey Dave, says all the magical, mystical, musical dreams came together with Tales. We are so lucky to have these young, driven Yes men produce this album, along with the perfect artist, manager, and producer. It is quite amazing we have all lived through this time in history. Topographic, the whole universe, the cover, stage, music, personalities, design. It is outstanding and unrepeatable. I agree. Absolutely unrepeatable. Yeah. And I don't think they tried to repeat Close to the Edge, and I don't think they tried to repeat Tales with Relayer. Relayer really is a whole different thing. The only thing in common is some of the players, and there's some long songs. That's it. And the rest of it is just a whole other flavor, color, shade, even the cover. I mean, it's so different in so many ways. So I love that. It is truly unrepeatable.
Absolutely.
yeah, Yes are always trying to do something new, which I really appreciate about that.
Oh, and Dave says the Canada material was later years from a different tour, Dave, than Steve's remembering from the article.
Oh, huh.
Wonder what tour
that was. Guess I have to double check that then.
Yeah.
So what else is going on at Yes Music Books, Kevin?
Right. Okay. Well, currently, I just pressed go today on printing some calendars. So one of the people that I contacted for this Tales book and also the Tormata book was the legendary rock photographer Barry Plummer, and he very kindly in the end sent me all his archive of Yes photographs, and there are some amazing things in there, and Yes related photographs as well. So Rick when he wasn't in the band, mid 70s, that kind of thing, or late 70s, early 80s, and so I'm currently starting to work on a book of those photographs. So what I'm going to do with those is find out everything I can in my usual style about these photographs. So we've got photographs of them live playing at the Crystal Palace Bowl, for example. So I want to find out everything I can about those concerts that he took photographs of there. And then we've got photographs of earlier shows, in fact, as well. So back into 71, I think, 70 even, perhaps, a few photographs of his collection there. And going right up to drama, right up to 1980.
Oh, okay.
Slightly into the 80s. So I'm starting to work on that book. But as a kind of prelude to that, in true Yes form, I've created a 2026 calendar with some of those images from Barry Plummer, the appropriate images. And yes, I'm publishing that at the moment, and that's going to be going on general sale, a very limited number of those quite soon. The people who subscribe to my e-newsletter have already got their copies on order. So yes, that's what I'm doing. And then the Barry Plummer book 2026, and then looking forward, I'm going to have to do the relayer book. So yeah, I'm slightly nervous about the relayer book because the Gottlieb brothers did their fantastic relayer book, and I'm going to have to find different things to say about it. But I'm sure I will.
Cool. Where can people find you and all your wonderful material, Kevin?
2 places: yesmusicpodcast.com and yesmusicbooks.com.
Awesome. Thanks for taking time with us. We appreciate it very much. One last shout out for any live recordings that you do listen to that you have dug up, and did you go to any during the process of this that you visited, or is that like a whole separate in a different closet and area of the whole Tales universe for you?
I think it's a different aspect of it. Yes, I mean what I would say is that my own personal experience of Tales Live is sides 1 and 4 on that tour a few years ago now, which I really enjoyed. I thought it was wonderful, and of course the edited highlights package that we had most recently, which I enjoyed. But I do have to say that every time I thought they were going to play my favorite bits, they stopped and went on to a different part.
Yeah.
I haven't listened to that since it came out. I got to revisit that.
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks so much for taking time with us. Stay on the line with us after we say goodbye to the audience. And audience, thank you so much for hanging out with us, whether you're watching on YouTube or Facebook Live or watching us on the archive on Drum Talk TV as well. Thanks for joining us there. And here on Yesshift, Steve, they can write us as well, can't they? And listen to us if they don't want to see us.
Yeah, you can search Yesshift. You'll probably find us, and you can email us at yesshiftpodcast@gmail.com.
Suggestions, complaints. Well, I'll take the suggestions. Steve will take the complaints. No, we'll pass the complaints on to Kevin. There you go. All right. Thanks, everybody, so much. We'll be back with more fun soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.